Shooter Armed Assailant Response Training for the DHS Ride Hide Flight Protocol, presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're super happy you can join us today. My name is Michelle Wilcox, and I will be your moderator. I will also be monitoring questions you may have during the session. Before we open up the session, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discussed can be found at the URL currently showing on your screen. I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. We do not control the audio, your devices control the audio. So if you have audio difficulties, try adjusting the volume settings on your device. If a telephone line goes down during the call, hang up and call back again at the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen question box for an alternative call-in number. Feel free to ask questions, provide feedback by using the questions box during the webinar. If you're using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear. Then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately. We're going to actually be taking questions at the end. So I will be tracking them as we go. If we cannot get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrng.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged. And again, the presenter will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of upcoming webinars covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Heffernan webinar website. With that, let's begin today's webinar, Active Shooter Armed Assailant Response. Our presenter today is Dr. Steve Albrecht. Dr. Albrecht is a trainer, author, and consultant specializing in complex HR issues and security concerns. He holds a doctorate in business administration, an MA in security management, a BS in psychology, and a BA in English. He's a board certified in HR, security management, employee coaching, and threat management. He has written 24 books on business, service, leadership, security, and criminal justice subjects. And thank you, Dr. Albrecht, for being here today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks to the good folks at Heffernan and also Aspen Risk Management. Michelle, I think I have a window that's so we can see my slides. We're good?
I can't see your slides. I changed the.
Okay, so it gave me the slide share again. So maybe it was give me that button back. I'll hit it.
Let me change presenter. It's not letting me take it back. Hold on. Give me 1 second, and then I'll send it back over to you. Sorry about that. Okay, you should have it now. Do you have it? Steve? Oh. Sorry, people. We just had this going a second ago, and it was all good. Give me 1 sec. It looks like he's offline. Sorry about that. Bear with us. Technology, you gotta love it or hate it. I'm gonna give him a call right now. Sorry, folks. We are just having a little technical difficulty, but Dr. Albrecht is going to call in, and then I'm just going to have to advance the slides for him. So again, thank you for your patience. And we'll get this party started. And just to remind everybody, yes, all the slides will be available after the presentation. I will be following up in an email that will send a link to copy, and then we have one resource document that will also be included on a sample general panic button example. So let's wait till we get Mr. Albrecht on here. I think it was a problem. He's having trouble loading in the site, but bear with us. We'll get back on track. Unfortunately, I don't have any jokes to tell. I'm just getting
Shall we
ready
back
to.
on now?
You're back on. Thank
Okay,
you.
great.
So you're just gonna
My,
have to let me know when to advance.
yeah, I have the slide. If you want to give me permission, I'll pull them up.
Oh, so you're in now?
Yeah, if you give me
Oh.
the permission, I'll pull the slides up.
Okay, 2 seconds. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay,
Okay, show my
fingers
screen.
crossed.
You can see those now, right,
Woohoo.
Michelle?
Awesome. Yes. Just need to
Okay.
get. There you go. All right. Sorry, guys.
Thanks everybody for the time and patience on that. And thanks to the good folks at Heffernan and Aspen Risk Management doing these programs for them for probably close to 6 or 7 years. And I've known Steve Thompson and Kathy Marks at Aspen for over 20 years. If I have a claim to fame in this world, it is that I wrote the first book on workplace violence back in 1994. You can see the book on the top left there called Ticking Bombs. I wrote that book with the police psychologist in San Diego PD, a guy named Michael Mantell. Mantell was one of the early experts in workplace violence. And if you look really, really, really tiny print there, you can see that back in 1994, below my name, which is in small print, that we had the Postmaster General write the foreword for our book, because back in those days, as you recall, in the early 90s, workplace violence was really connected most often to the post office. And fortunately, they have dropped that reputation. But unfortunately, as we look forward into this subject in 1999 with Columbine, and then a host of other situations that have happened in this country and even around the world, we see that the problem still exists. For those of you that are in California, where I am, in San Diego, we have Assembly Bill 553, which now mandates a lot of extra work for organizations, public and private, about workplace violence prevention, including injury and illness and threat record keeping, site security surveys of your facilities to make changes, and also having somebody be the administrator for workplace violence related policies, procedures, and responses. So you can see that I've written 28 books, and a lot of those books are on workplace violence prevention or on my specialty area, which is libraries. 2 books on library safety and security. So at my age and my career, I thought I would be at the end of this subject. I thought at this point in time, I have been working in this area since 1992, that we would see the end of workplace violence, school violence, healthcare violence, and church violence. If you saw the news yesterday in my city in San Diego, we had a shooting outside the mosque. Unfortunately, this building is about 4 blocks from my mother's house, and she's 83 years old, so it was kind of terrifying for her to be driving back from lunch with all her pals to see all that stuff unfold. And so it concerns me from an overall threat assessment perspective, and I'm not sure exactly what we do about it as business leaders and people that are creating the environment for employees to be safe, is that the desire for revenge is what drives these people. And we will talk in our time together about the value and importance of how we have good policies and procedures in taking care of employees and taxpayers and visitors and customers and clients. As we look at this subject, how we treat people makes a big difference in how they respond to us. Doesn't mean that we don't get to be assertive and that we don't enforce policies and procedures, but if I look at my work, and I've interviewed 3 workplace violence murderers in my career in prison, and each of them blamed how they were treated by either their organization or, in the one case, their ex-wife as to why they did what they did. Certainly no excuse for their behavior, but you can see that as we look at these cases around the country, around the world, that revenge continues to be a driving, motivating factor for why these people do this. Excuse me. Sometimes in your role, you can be in human resources or risk management or insurance, or you can be in a security function, law enforcement function. You can be in elected government. You can be a board member. You may have to make difficult decisions around safety and security of your facilities and your people. And these are some of the things that you hear or may hear or have heard occasionally from people who don't want you to bring this to the attention of your organization. You distracted us, you wasted our time and money, you brought in outside consultants, you scared people, you made us nervous. Nothing you predicted happened. And I always like to say in threat assessment, well, then you're welcome. We cannot predict human behavior, especially dangerous human behavior, but we can certainly look at the warning signs. We can certainly look at pre-attack or threatening behaviors, which we're going to talk about now. One of the things that's counterintuitive as you look at this work and the subject that we're on is that many times we over-respond to people who make verbal threats to us, and we under-respond to people who do not threaten the target directly, but, and this is the important part, make third-party threats. And this is what the Secret Service and the US Marshals and the FBI, who have trained me in my career, have got me to understand, which is most of the people that do these things do not tell the target directly. So in the shooting that happened yesterday in San Diego, I'm positive the 17-year-old and the 19-year-old, or however old they were, 2 perpetrators that did this, did not contact the mosque and say, we're going to blow up the building and shoot it out. What they did do was very common in these cases is they warned a third party, which was the mother of one of the suspects. So I'm not saying we disregard threats that come to our organization, either over the phone, face-to-face, over the counter, out in the field, or through social media, but it is a different response completely than those types of threats that come to a third party, which is not that the person says, I'm going to shoot my boss directly to his or her face, but they tell a coworker. The kid that wants to shoot the football coach on the high school team doesn't tell the coach. He would get expelled, suspended, arrested, put through a mental health exam. He tells the other players. So we will talk about a model called hunters versus howlers, which I think will reinforce this for you. I don't know all the details in the mosque shooting in San Diego. My background is with San Diego PD. I was a patrol sergeant and a domestic violence detective for 16 years there. A lot of friends that came from that agency. But I would look at the new definition that the FBI is giving about these types of people, and this my intuitive thought is these kids, they're baby teenagers, 15, 17, something like that. Fit this description of the new FBI's description of what they call the nihilistic violent extremists. Individuals who engage in criminal behavior within the U.S. and abroad in furtherance of political or social or religious goals that derive primarily from a hatred of society. And so it's not about race and gender and skin color and things like that as their targets as much as they want the world to be chaotic, indiscriminate chaos, destruction, and social instability. They work online with each other, and I would guess that the FBI and everybody else who's looking at these shooters from yesterday will find a rich history in their social media and dark web and deep web um, interactions around these things. Where these extremist groups have influenced these young kids, especially. Last paragraph there. Extremists use social media to connect with individuals and desensitize them to violence, corrupting and grooming them, these individuals towards committing future acts for the purpose of accelerating the downfall of society. This goes back to the larger picture, which I just talked about, which is revenge is the primary motive for them because of their miserable lives. And so obviously their function is to make the world chaotic. And certainly yesterday they succeeded in a small way. Fortunately, not a larger loss of life, but unfortunately, they had a loss of life.
Steve, I don't mean to interrupt you, but the volume, your microphone, it's static. It's very hard to hear you.
I'm not sure what to do, Michelle. I mean, I'm in a city hall in a conference room, so.
Okay, all right.
I'll do the best I can.
Thanks.
Is that a little bit better in terms of the clarity?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So what we see for OSHA is a definition of 4 categories of workplace violence perpetrator. The most common is criminals. That's robbery, which if you don't have the type of business that has cash or jewelry or goods or services that invite that, it's quite rare that you would have that. The second category is people that we provide services to. And this is the most common these days that we see, like in the situation from yesterday, students, patients, healthcare, church attendees, passengers, vendors, people we provide services to. And I'm not saying that people from yesterday are in this category, but this is the realm for where they are. Third category, current or former employees. This is the one the news media thinks is most prevalent and most common. It is actually not. It is category 1 is the most common. And then the fourth is domestic violence involving an employee. I call this to your attention because it is a shadow issue in organizations. We do not want to pry into people's personal lives until it affects the work and the safety of others. And that's what happens in domestic violence situations when we discover one of our employees has a restraining order or it is fearful of her ex-boyfriend or ex-husband. And we discover that when a person shows up in the lobby and is super angry. So I encourage you, especially if you're in a policy position, leadership position, to change the language in your policies to say, if you have a restraining order, or if you have some sense that a person could cross from home to work in a domestic violence potential situation, you must tell us. You cannot use your own discretion in these situations to say, well, I'm not going to say anything and hope he doesn't show up. We must be able to plan for this person's arrival and liaison with the police if necessary, or improve physical security, or move this person to a new part of the building, or put them on leave of absence with pay, things like that. In California, we have something called Senate Bill 400, which mandates 2 things related to domestic violence. One is the employee cannot be fired for bringing domestic violence concerns to the attention of their employer. It is a protected class, like age, race, gender, sexual orientation. And the second is we must, in California, create a safety plan for that employee at work. About 15 or 16 other states often have had the same type of language as California in terms of the desire for protecting this person's employment and creating a safety plan. And then the last category is an interesting one to me, and it's in parentheses because it's my category, which is, I think, cyber attacks, especially involving electricity and water and healthcare, that could put people at risk of injury or death, is going to be a workplace violence category. I just have to get OSHA to believe me. Here's a cartoon that came out in the 90s from an HR magazine. Got to get rid of some people, Cosgrove, who are the least likely to come back and shoot us. That was the joke back in those days when we looked at that time span and how we perceived workplace violence to be ex-employees and current employees, whereas that is not the most common topic, but it still resonates with the news media. And that was kind of the thinking back then. In my work for the Ticking Bombs book, I interviewed Robert Mack. He was a 25-year employee of General Dynamics in San Diego. During a termination meeting, he shot and killed the HR manager that was handling his case and shot and wounded his boss, who died. I interviewed him in prison about a year after the case, and basically what he told me was that General Dynamics was responsible for what happened because of how they treated him. And I interviewed him 20 years after I initially did, and he passed away after being released from prison a couple of years ago. When I look at this case, it goes back to that larger picture of the desire for revenge as the driving motivator for people. how we treat people in the employment process, as applicants, as interviewees, as people on probation. How we treat people in the HR process makes a big difference in how they perceive their sense of self in the organization. How we treat people as customers, taxpayers, visitors, vendors, makes a big difference. I interviewed Larry Hansel in prison as well. Larry Hansel killed 2 people at a company he'd been laid off at. He returned after being gone about 6 weeks, and he had another job, but he held that company, it's called Elgar Corporation, responsible, and killed 2 of the senior executives at that facility and was arrested. And then when I look at the last category there, the 4th category, domestic violence, it reminds me of my interview right before the pandemic with Scott DeCry. Scott DeCry, for those who didn't know, California, killed his ex-wife and 7 other people at his ex-wife's beauty salon in Seal Beach, California. I interviewed him in prison right before the pandemic, and he basically said, I wanted to get back at my wife for our child custody problems. And so the issue that we face in this society is, how do we minimize the impact of revenge? How do we do it through awareness and vigilance and policy? How do we do it through security improvements? How do we do it through improvements in our HR and response protocols? So let's talk just a little bit about domestic violence as a workplace issue, and I've covered it a little bit. We sometimes may have stalking cases. We may have non-custodial parent disputes. We may have somebody who has a restraining order against the organization. It is significantly important that we know about these things. Even though it has a sense of privacy for the employees, it will affect the workplace, that we can take steps to protect this person, create a safety plan, and just as important, protect not only that employee, but every other employee and our facilities as well, including liaison with the police. So if you have access to policy, if you have access to the stance that your organization wants to do for this, it's important that you make this mandatory in terms of reporting. One of the things that I have found to be most important and useful in my work is the creation and the collection of IQ points into what we would call a threat assessment team. You can call it a critical incident team or a response team or something like that, or just a management, safety, or security team. But what it has is these elements and these participants that bring their expertise to the situation of assessing threat. And the threats that they're assessing are current employees, former employees, domestic violence involving an employee. They are assessing threats from current or former customers. I've seen this at law firms with problematic ex-clients. I've seen it in public-private sector organizations where we have this collection of leaders in the organization coming together to bring their expertise to the potential situation dealing with. Human resources, security, if you have that function, liaison with law enforcement in your community, which could be police or sheriff. And you'll notice that the attorney has an asterisk there, because the situation for the attorney could be a board attorney or a outside counsel or in-house counsel. That person keeps all the records and the notes for any discussions about employee threat assessment, because there is attorney work product privilege there, and it can be subject to subpoena to the media or to release to the public through Freedom of Information Act. You may also see some benefit from having your employee assistance program or EAP provider there, or if you have a behavioral health referral in your community that could come in, as long as they're not in a treating relationship with the employee in question or the other subject in question, they can provide insight. You have safety professionals, risk management. Facilities is very important. We're talking about access control and doors and key cards and cameras. IT is a significant role player on the threat assessment team as well for access control and badging and camera systems, and also protecting the cyber function from attack. And then over on the right-hand side, the CEO's office doesn't have to necessarily be involved in the discussion unless he or she wants to. City managers, county administrative officers, CEOs, plant managers, general managers may be involved in these discussions, or may just provide oversight to the larger group. And then you can see on the right-hand side some of the ancillary people that can come in and provide expertise and information as well. But the left-hand side tends to be the core team, usually, in my experience, driven by human resources. So if you take nothing from our time together today other than think about the domestic violence policies in your organization, think about the difference between direct threats versus third-party threats, this threat assessment team piece is significant, because what you say here is, I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I just have to have my colleagues in the room to discuss current or former employee, current or former taxpayer, customer, visitor, vendor, stranger, cyber threat, domestic violence issue, something that attacks our reputation, something that's done through social media, bomb threats, things like that. We want this group to be able to convene as necessary to talk about these concerns. So if I go back to what I have learned in my career, it is these 5 key elements. One is how we treat people, and the client relationship, customer relationship, taxpayer relationship, and the employee relationship makes a big difference. Fair, ethical, empathic, patient, consistent, reasonable, legal treatment of everybody, and do a lot to drive away this potential for revenge. Second, this sounds counterintuitive, and I hear this all the time, which is this person made a threat to harm us. Now I want to enforce consequences. It could be through the police and other ways, restraining orders, things like that. But what I'm looking for more is third-party leakage. This person tells, either verbally or electronically, somebody else what they plan to do. And we see this over and over and over again, especially in cases that are most recent, but this goes back my whole career. Those who are old enough to remember that President Reagan got shot, he was shot by a guy named John Hinckley. Before he shot President Reagan, John Hinckley told Jodie Foster, the actress at Yale, she was a student at Yale, 3 times he called her on the phone and said, "I'm going to shoot the president for you." He did not say anything to the White House or the president or send it a letter or a phone call to threaten Reagan. He told her what he was going to do. So this is sort of the premier example of a third-party threat, which is that it comes in not directed at the target, but is directed at somebody else to tell the target. And we can talk for hours as to why they do this. Part of it is they can't help themselves. Part of it is they want to see what the organization's reaction is. Part of it is they want to see whether they can get away with what they have done. I'm big on enforcing consequences even for people's words and assessing this language in terms of, is it a real threat? Third, access control really, really matters. I've spent my entire career doing site security assessments of businesses. I did Boeing Company and Nike and all kinds of other places. I've done hundreds of sites that are water districts and city councils and city and county buildings and libraries and things like that. And it's all about access control. Staff on one side, customers on the other. Door locks, key cards, camera systems, lighting, all that stuff really, really matters in terms of creating a safe environment. And when you think about it from the perspective of outside plaintiff's attorneys looking at your facilities and operations, they're going to say, have you set the standard? Do you follow best practices for other industries or businesses in your same field when it comes to physical security? If the answer is no, then do what you can to improve even a little bit the physical security stance that you have. Category 4, or point number 4, the national protocol in the United States for workplace violence, active shooter, somebody with a weapon of any type that could harm folks is run, hide, fight. I will give you a couple screenshots of some videos to look at for training. One that I don't like, that's done by the Department of Homeland Security, and one that I do like, which is done by the California State University system. Run out of the building, taking as many people as you can. Don't run into harm's way, run away from danger. Hide out inside the building, safest place you can, break room, restroom, conference room, office, training room, someplace we store the file folders or the mops, stuff as many people as we can in there and wait for the arrival of the police. I have trained thousands of cops in my career for the active shooter protocol, and they know that the response time is usually for most cities 5 to 10 minutes in terms of the response to engage with the perpetrator. We want to be out of harm's way, and we are sheltered in place while that happens. Third possibility, fight back prior to the arrival. And then the last one of the things I talk about with staff is when you call, and verify this to be true in your community or in your state, in your city, that if you call 911 on your cell phone, which could be faster and safer, you may not get the police or sheriff, you may get the state police or the highway patrol. That's the way it is in a lot of cities. It rings to the state police or the highway patrol. So one of the things I tell staff is the most significant way to get fast, accurate response by the sheriff or the PD in our communities is to use a landline and to get it to ring just to the dispatcher as opposed to going to the round robin through the state police dispatch center. So I talked about the value of access control, and also that when employees, if they have to evacuate your facility, make sure they give their key cards to the police department or sheriff's office responders or the paramedics or fire department so they can get inside the building. I've seen situations and emergencies where PD and sheriff and paramedics and fire can't get through the building because they don't have key cards. make sure that they give them to them. The second thing I have seen in my career, which is significant in mass events, is the presence of tourniquets. You can go to stopthebleed.org for tourniquet training for free. You can go to bleedingcontrol.org for tourniquet training for free. It's the same organization, just two separate websites. These organizations came about as a result of the Sandy Hook shootings in Pennsylvania. They created something called the Hartford Protocol. Connecticut. The Hartford Protocol in Hartford, Connecticut was doctors and paramedics and trauma surgeons put together a tourniquet training program, which they have now taken nationwide, and you can attend it online, and it's very valuable. So I want to see, in my perfect world, more tourniquets in first aid kits. I have a bunch. I have them in various bags in my car and etc., just because you never know. The third-party leakage part, I'm going to talk to you about the difference between hunters versus howlers. Howlers are people that draw negative attention. Their function is to scare people. Their function is typically not to harm people. Their function is to frighten people and to disrupt the business, like a bomb threat. Hunters, by direct contrast, do not warn the target directly. They engage in stealth like real hunters do out in the forest, and they tell a third party not to target directly. We will talk about this hunter-howler piece in just a second. And again, the last one, as my therapy colleagues tell me, hurt people can hurt people, meaning people who are bullied or believe that they're in some sort of injustice situation can harm other folks. And this is what we want to avoid and how we treat everybody we do business with or provide services to or employ. If you look at the videos that I'm going to talk to you about, the run, hide, fight videos, one characteristic is that cover stops bullets. This is concrete and steel. This is things that are engine blocks or things that stop bullets. Concealment is what hides people. And this is not bulletproof. This is tinted windows or glass or curtains or blinds. We want to get people as best as possible behind things that can stop bullets. Second one, yesterday was an anomaly to me as a San Diego PD guy and somebody that's looked at these cases for over 35 years. It's an anomaly to see two perpetrators in these situations. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Columbine was a perfect example. Certainly the terrorism, 9/11, and things like that, but it is very rare for two perpetrators to do things as a group, and so that's why the case was so rare in San Diego. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but it's mostly rare, which means most of the time we were dealing with lone wolf male attackers. We had females do these types of cases as well, but they're not in the majority as obviously as men are, especially young men. There's something going on with the young men in our society where they believe it is their only solution is to do something horrific like this. Third point here is very, very significant to me, which is do not allow anybody in your organization to speak to the media. It's a natural human tendency in emergencies to talk when someone puts a microphone in your face, but they say things like, I hope Larry got out okay, and people didn't even know Larry was at work and his family would be terrified. And also they say stuff like, I knew this was going to happen, and then that just encourages lawsuits. So the only people that should be speaking to the media, if at all, you don't have to, that's what the police and the sheriff are for. As you know by all the press conferences they have after these incidents, it should be someone who's trained to do so. It doesn't necessarily have to be the CEO or the CAO or the leader, but somebody who's trained to do so. And the last one, and this is very significant to me, having had a little PTSD in my career, excuse me, the thing I want to see from organizations, if you are able, is make a reach out connection to your employee assistance program EAP provider if you have one, or start looking at psychological resources in advance of problem situations for your employees. Meaning you could have a line of duty death in the parking lot. You could have somebody have a heart attack at work. You could have somebody injured or killed in a car accident or by machines or equipment. These things happen to people we care about at work, our coworkers and colleagues, and it is significant to have mental health resources in place before these things happen that you can call. And in a perfect world, they would have some familiarity with your organization in advance to coming on board. So one of the things I always get, especially with the news media when I go on TV, which I used to do a lot and now I don't, is this idea of what's the reasons for these things. These things probably make perfect sense to you, especially on an intuitive basis. These people that do these things come from bullying and abuse and exposure to violence. They've either had it happen to them or they witnessed it. Their mental health history is both troubled, something's bothering them, and they are troubling, meaning they bother people. The desire for revenge may or may not be stopped by empathic treatment. That's our best hope. That's what I've been talking to you about. No remorse if they survive. They either kill themselves or are killed by the police, but sometimes if they survive, they become, at least in their own mind, a martyr. They engage in targeted violence. They shoot at security guards or at HR people or at women who broke their heart or at coworkers they hate or other students that they hate. They're narcissistically entitled, meaning that they feel powerful and enraged and energized during this time when they're wearing tactical gear and camo, which is what these guys in the mosque shooting were wearing today, I'm told, and carrying all these big weapons. They feel like Rambo. They have a very dangerous characteristic to themselves, which is they're suicidally depressed and homicidally depressed. So they're a danger to themselves and they're a danger to other people, which is a bad combo. And then the last one is so disheartening to me after all these years is the desire to be infamous, not famous, right? Lady Gaga's famous. But the desire to be infamous is why they do these things and they make videos and they post, or they do it on the way over. They write manifestos and things like that. And the function for that is to have people hate them even in death, which is just such an odd characteristic. I belonged for a number of years to a group called ATAP, the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, and you can see the model that we have used in ATAP. ATAP is an international organization for threat assessment, Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. We're in 14 or 15 cities around the country, in Europe and Asia, Africa and Canada and Australia. And this process here, grievance, violent ideation, research and planning, pre-attack, probing, attack, is very understandable and very measurable, not predictable, but very measurable in the cases that we see. So there is some type of grievance this person has against other people or a group or a race or a gender, or they just want to get back into the world. They come to a decision point at that violent ideation stage. Most people, in road rage situations, it lasts for 5 seconds and then they go on with their day. For these people, it builds. And they move up this scale to practice and pre-attack and rehearsal and arming themselves and practicing with guns and things like that until they get to the final act stage. But you can see on the right-hand side that what we do to de-escalate people, that could be physical security, it could be camera systems, alarms, key cards, access control. It could be how we treat people in the employment process, how we treat applicants, how we treat people that we discipline or terminate. And then we can do the opposite and escalate people based on not doing things correctly. So this is not a prediction model, it is a pathway model, meaning these people tend to do the same things, and as necessary, when we can intervene at the earliest stages, we can stop them by, quote, knocking them off the path, which is what the Secret Service and so many other agencies that I have been taught by have trained me to do. Look at this characteristics here in this manifesto. I've lived a depressed, disconnected, disaffected life with no real job, girlfriend, supportive family structure, or goals. Bad sign, right? Because of this, I hate people and they seem to dislike me. Another bad sign. I've collected the many injustices directed me my whole life. That's their perception. The world is out to make me miserable. Now I'll kill as many people as I can for my revenge. I'll dress like a commando and mimic my idols. And they do idolize these people who have killed before me, so that people remember me and talk about my actions for decades. And we do. We talk about these people on the anniversary of the shooting. We talk about these people on the anniversary of the attack. We talk about these people during the court cases, as we're seeing now with this Luigi character in the shooting of the healthcare executive, the guy that killed Charlie Kirk. These people are famous in their way. This is what they want. I'll post my words or photos or videos of my discontent online to provide proof of either my irrational life views, religious zealotry, racial hatred, my active and untreated mental illness, and my rage against the world. I know, this is significant, right? I know the US and international press and instant social media will expose me around the globe minutes after I'm dead or in jail, because that's what they do. Well, this is a pretty good manifesto, and I know that because I wrote it. It's my manifesto. I had a couple of adult beverages one night, and I said, I've been looking at these cats for 30-something years. I want to create what I would think they would say if I gathered all of their talking points together. This is what they're all about. So when we go back to the idea of the why, my therapy colleagues, my colleagues in threat assessment, talk a lot about the broken bridge of self-esteem. There's not a lot we may be able to do this as a society so far, but we can maybe do this at an individual basis and based on how we treat people in the work environment, the school environment, or the healthcare environment, or the church environment. I'm disconnected, disaffected, depressed, driven to act, desire for revenge, desperate, dangerous, all the D's we don't want. The broken bridge of self-esteem is really two factors here from my colleagues. One is they don't care about their own life and they don't care about the lives of others, literally. And that's a sad thing. I don't care if I live or die. I don't care whether other people live or die. That's how they can shoot strangers and children, and doctors, cops, and all kinds of people that had no connection to them whatsoever, but just they're miserable. And this is what one of them said: I want to outdo my idols. I want international attention. I want to be infamous. No one kill me once, my actions will move on. And sadly, this person was absolutely correct. These people resonate with us in our world even long after they are gone. We're still talking about Columbine. We're still talking about some of these perpetrators, especially on a regional basis when the time comes for the anniversary of their event, or as we saw in San Diego yesterday. We've had other shootings that are religiously oriented. In San Diego, there was a shooting at a city called Poway, at this place called Shabbat House, which was a Jewish synagogue. One of the worst workplace violence cases in the history of the United States happened in San Diego at McDonald's in 1984. I was 8 days in the police academy cop back in those days when that case happened. The worst mass murder. 26 adults and employees and kids were killed by a perpetrator there. So these things resonate with communities, unfortunately, and those that have had them memorialize these situations, which has a pro and a con. The pro is it supports the dead and the family. The con is it resonates or re-erects these guys into the minds of our citizens as to what they did. So let's go back to this model here. Ted Calhoun, who helped with the ATAP pathway to violence, wrote a book called Hunters and Howlers. And follow the logic here with me for just a second, because it sounds a little bit counterintuitive. Ted Calhoun said, howlers howl. And the function of the howler is to scare people. And the function of the hunter is to harm people. He did a study for the U.S. Marshals called Hunters and Howlers, Threats and Violence Against Federal Judicial Officials in the United States. Look at it, it's a 200-year study, right? 1789 to 1993. The people that said, I'm going to burn down the courthouse and shoot the judge, did not do that. The people that just said nothing and told somebody else they were going to blow up the courthouse and harm the judge did those things. And he called the first group howlers, because what they did was howl. He called the second group hunters, because they gave no warning to the direct target. So when I look at the threats that I'm most concerned about, it is the direct threat to harm the business, but not aimed at somebody, can be managed. The one that is concerning to me is the one that is a third-party threat. It comes from somebody, it comes to our attention from somebody hearing it or reading about it from the actual person making the threat. It's not aimed at the target directly. And the last one I want you to think about as well, which is the implausibility of a lot of threats. And I would put bomb threats right up. If you Google my name, Steve Albrecht, and bomb threats, I will come up #1 on Google News articles for telling people not to evacuate a facility based only on a bomb threat without the presence of a suspicious package or device. And people say, Steve, you don't care about the kids, and what about the business? I've spent my entire adult life, since I'm 21 years old, taking care of people and being a shepherd and being a security guy. I do care about people, but I know the difference between hunters versus howlers. And so what Calhoun said was, howlers howl. They use anger and they create stress and anxiety in their targets. Their goal is to control the emotional state of the facility and the people. The hunters, their goal is to harm people. Real hunters tramp around in the forest with camouflage and sneak around so they don't scare off the prey. That's the same as what we see with hunters and howlers. Now, is it a perfect model? It's not, but it makes very good sense to me, and I've been using it my whole career. Hunters do not howl. Howlers do not hunt. When howlers do not hunt, they're no longer howlers. So there is an exception down at the bottom you can see there, which we talked about, called Deborah Jenkins called this the intimacy effect. Previous sexual intimacy between victim and suspect raises the stakes for danger for the victim. As a DV investigator for the PVA, I handled 1,500 cases. I knew my first day on the job, the most dangerous cats were those guys that said, if I can't have you, nobody else can. They are also howlers who hunt. So in a threat assessment question that you might do as a team to talk to a potential target or victim employee at your organization would be, what is your relationship with this person who's threatening you? Ex-boyfriend, parents of a child together, ex-husband, live together, much more dangerous as opposed to some guy that I don't know who I met once at the gym. So look at these factors here. These are not profiles as in, are we profiling people? These are characteristics that we would give concern to if we saw this in a taxpayer, a customer, an ex-employee, or employee, etc. troubled, something's bothering them, troubling, they bother people. Anger turned inward is depression. Depressed people can be dangerous to themselves or others. Religious zealotry, connection to terror groups, this nihilistic, violent, extremist perspective. They collect injustices. They believe the world's out to get them. They're hypersensitive to being slighted. They have what's called a brittle personality. We all know people like this, even in their own families. There may be substance abuse, typically, and for younger people, it's antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication, also Ritalin and Adderall. They may be bullied as opposed to being a bully. They may have significant off-the-job problems with no sense of support from like counselors or employee assistance program or no friends. Required to practice with a firearm is not a big risk factor for me unless it's unusual, unless it's something out of context of what this person normally does. The big one up there besides injustice collectors for me is they talk about school violence or workplace violence or cases that have happened like in San Diego yesterday as if it were a good thing. Those people frighten me. That's not a normal empathic human response. When they leak out that stuff about how they thought it was cool or exciting or powerful, I get concerned. Third-party threats, howler behavior, we can put a fence around. Hunter behavior is sometimes not noticed until farther down the path. And we knock them off the path from ideas to actions, which is why we create the threat assessment team. So I hope that's making sense for you so far in terms of my thought process with you today. Okay, so give me some good news, Steve. Well, the presence of a stable family around this person, no history of child abuse or physical or sexual abuse, the appropriate peers. If they have mental health issues, they have no access to firearms. This is going to come out in the San Diego case that this woman's got her guns stolen by her son and he used those to kill people. That's going to be a prosecutable offense in San Diego. They're in a therapeutic relationship and getting counseling, which is a good sign. They're on medication, stable. They're not using street drugs or Ritalin or Adderall, willy-nilly. There's no suicidality or homicidality in their discussions. Their behavior may be attention-seeking as opposed to planning. I'd rather focus on the attention-seeking because we can stop that. And then that they have hope for the future, that their sense of self is connected to living forward, not ending their lives or ending the lives of other people. So when we see these things on this screen, I have hope. So let's kind of wrap up with some discussion about active shooters. I want to show you the two screenshots for the two videos, which I think are you can watch. I would prefer you watch the second one over the first that comes from the California State. Look at these 5 characteristics: playing dead, not targeting people, police recognizing the shooter. These incidents last for hours. They're not true. Okay. Even with long guns and semi-automatics and wearing tactical gear, we can still survive these events. I'm not asking you to tackle people. We can still survive these events by being out of sight of where we are. Second one, these incidents last for minutes. The faster we can call 911, the better, and be locked down and sheltered in place or out of the building when the cops get there, and so give them key cards if we can. Police are not going to recognize the shooter. We have to point them out. These shooters do target specific people, and lying on the floor playing dead, I do not believe is a good strategy ever. These people will fire through tinted glass. The police will not be able to provide first aid because they're busy with the attacker. And that may come to you with tourniquets and first aid kits so you can get these people to safety. And gunshots are not firecrackers or a car backfiring, which I always hear. The cops may come in a wave that is unbelievable. I think there were, 200 cop cars at the mosque shooting yesterday from my agency and others. When I look at the cops, they're going to come in plain clothes and in tactical gear and SWAT gear and in police uniforms that you may not recognize. County sheriffs, PD, Homeland Security, Border Patrol. Tell your staff, especially under stress, that what the cops are not going to look like is what they expect. It could be lots of different ones. Post-traumatic stress debriefings do help. They're very valuable. I learned that after being involved in some of the therapy referrals for the Jason Aldean concert in Vegas where 50 people were killed. The last one, don't forget to have staff give key cards to the first responders. So 2 videos to look at for your training purposes. This is the one that the City of Houston, Texas and Department of Homeland Security has. I'm not a fan of it just because the bad guy looks like Vin Diesel and he walks around shooting people with a shotgun. It's disturbing. I think you can get the same point. You can show it if you want to, but you can get the same point. There's the shelter in place that shooting that happened at the NFL headquarters in New York. That's a pretty good door block if ever I saw one. The one I prefer, and I think you ought to show to staff at least on a yearly basis, is the California State University Run, Hide, Fight video. It's a cartoon. It's not SpongeBob, but it's animated and it's kind of a lighter touch. It runs for about 8 minutes and 20 seconds. I think you can show it to your kids at home, age appropriate, about 14, 15 and above. This is what we do at school or the mall or the church or the restaurant or the movie theater. But I like this video. I've showed it many times. I think it resonates with, especially with younger staff. I would show it once a year as kind of a reminder of what we expect people to do in our workplace. So you can see the characteristics here: run, hide, fight, cover, stops bullets, concealment, hides you. We see the ones in yellow here is what typically people in healthcare do: evacuate, barricade, and protect. You don't evacuate hospital staff and leave patients alone or by themselves or defend for themselves, but staff moves patients to safety, barricades the facility, and keeps the shooters outside. And I use the lifeguard kind of buoy there, the model, to suggest to all staff at every level that your primary goal of care is yourself first, coworkers second, everybody else third. So you say, what about the little kids and what about the little old ladies and what about the customers? Take care of yourself first, take care of coworkers second, take care of everybody else third. If you are not safe, you cannot provide help to other people. You need to be in a position of safety before you can help. And then the other part is, do not stage outside by some flagpole or the dumpsters or in the parking lot. Get out of the way, because the cop's going to come in a wave and you don't want to be there when they get there. If you can get in your car and drive away, if it's safe to do that, because the cops are coming, they're going to block every exit, and your car could be stuck in a crime scene for 2 days. And the other part of that is the hiding out part. It doesn't have to be perfect bulletproof chamber, but it is a place where you can at least lock the doors. These people do not shoot the locks. They don't pretend to be the police. I've never seen that happen in my career. So I want to leave a little time for questions, and I'm happy to take them. These subjects have what I would call a doomsday clock ticking inside them. There's this violent extremist, nihilistic violent extremist piece here. You need to be prepared for that as organizations, and you don't have to do it by yourself. The best approach is a threat assessment team process to look at the hunters and howlers that may come to your attention, and then stop operating under what we would call the myth of no pest problems. That could never happen here. We've never had this issue, in which case I say great, but we want to be prepared anyway. For those of you in California, go back and look at Senate Bill 553 and make sure you're following the mandates for record keeping, training, site security, survey projects, and also that you have somebody who administers the workplace violence prevention plan and policies. And I can help you do that for our California people. Michelle, back over to you. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We've got a couple questions. The videos you were just referring to, are those going to be made available, or where can you give me the information where they can find them?
Sure, I can send you the links, but they're on YouTube. So if you put in Run, Hide, Fight, City of Houston, Texas for YouTube, it'll pop up. If you put in Run, Hide, California State University System, it'll pop up. I think they have the both of those videos are in English and Spanish as well, as I've seen on YouTube, but they're widely available on YouTube. They have millions and millions of views.
Great. And then at the very beginning of the presentation, you referred to a third party, and somebody was asking, was that somebody you don't know?
So a third party threat is that the person who wants to harm somebody tells somebody not related to the target. So the football coach hears it from a player, from another player, not directly to the football coach. So if I want to shoot my boss, I don't tell my boss, I tell a third party. That is the biggest risk factor for threat assessment that I know, which is this person does not leak to the target, which is what we expect. They leak to someone else, typically a third party. And in the cases of, like we saw with the mosque shooting, this kid leaked to his parents, he leaked to his mother about what he was going to do. And so this is very common. They tell somebody who is connected to the situation, but not the actual target. They make what is called a threat to a third party.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. One last one, thoughts on CCW permitted employees on the job site or office for protection?
I get this question. Yeah, I get this question a lot. I'm not a fan of it for a couple of reasons. One is I think the accuracy of some people that are CCW holders may be not as good as the cops. I mean, and the cops are not always perfect shots either, but that's a concern. And the other is there is a psychological hurdle that people in law enforcement make to be able to take the life of somebody who is trying to harm or kill other people, which I'm not always sure everybody knows. And so sometimes people freeze in the moment of truth, whereas the cops typically don't do that because that's what they've been trained to do, unlike the military. And the other part is there are so many liability issues around safety of the firearm and make sure it doesn't, get into the wrong hands. I see this in schools, where are we going to keep it so a kid doesn't get hands on it, doesn't get stolen, and all this kind of stuff. I'm not a fan of the approach unless there's lots of steps taken in terms of screening people to do it, including psychological screening, making sure that they can store their firearms safely and that they can use them. But there's a lot of hurdles to cover, especially in terms of liability.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody, for our technical issues, having patience. We appreciate it. We also appreciate you attending today's webinar presented by Heffernan. We will send an email with information and instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. Thank you, Dr. Albrecht, for your time and expertise today. We hope all of the attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of your time. Be sure to join us on June 9th for our performance evaluations, skill building refresher for managers and supervisors webinar. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everybody.